Your dad is sick and then he died? Well, you're responsible for the late fee, posted by Pro Jazz TV Trumpets. To begin, my dad had a trust set up so that if something happens to him or he died, then a trustee can handle his affairs and probate court could be avoided for his stuff after death. However, a trust only grants those permissions once certain criteria are met, such as being incapacitated and of course death. My dad got sick in December, was mentally not there after waking up from an induced coma, and never mentally recovered. During most of this, I was able to handle the basic bills with his debit card and Social Security deposits, but I could not access his savings account where he kept money for things like home and car insurance annual dues and HOA annual dues. Not wanting to rush anything, I did not petition the doctors for a certificate of incapacitation until February. That part was easy. The docs were signed off on almost immediately upon asking. That gave me the ability to contact the attorney who made the trust and activate my power of attorney, guardianship, and accept my role as successor trustee. This obviously gave me access to accounts. It took about 2 weeks for the attorney to record everything with the county, but Dad got sicker in March with an infection he could not fight and was given weeks to live. He passed in April. When you're told that your dad, a man that you love unconditionally, is going to die soon, you put things on hold and spend time with that person, like every waking moment. And I know that the power, the gas, and the water isn't going to get shut off immediately if I'm a few days late. I know the mortgage has a grace period. The car insurance company, read that again, an insurance company, even worked with me on the delayed annual payment and put his account into a monthly status with a payment that reflected the same discount given to people who pay the full year up front. The HOA, however, dues were due in April. I got access to his funds in March, and then I got the news. His neighbors loved my dad. His house was the neighborhood party house. The entire HOA board hung out there. And the HOA, for the most part, is laid back on rules. I told the treasurer that I wasn't paying a dime until he died, and he said, no worries, and he'll waive the late fee because I shouldn't be worrying about bills at a time like that. The HOA president, however, at his deathbed, asked me when I was paying. I said, well, I'll worry about that later. She asked if I didn't have the money personally. Stupidly, I said, I have the money, but I'm spending time with my dad. I'm the only familiar face that he knows right now. Dad passed, and we had the funeral, and I went home for 2 weeks to decompress before managing his affairs and whatnot. I came back to 3 invoices in his mailbox. The first one was just the annual dues, but the next one had a 10% late fee, and the one after that had a 20% late fee in addition to the 10% late fee. I called the treasurer, and he said he was overruled by the president. I called the entire board and, surprise, the president didn't call back. The board agreed and tried to press her, but she would not budge. During all of this, they added another 10% through the property management company who sends the invoice bypassing the treasurer. The reasoning? There was a responsible agent prior to the due date who could have paid this. I talked to the attorney who very plainly said that the HOA past due fees are magnitudes less than it would cost to fight them. So I freaking paid it with a letter addressed to the board that said, all HOA board members invited to the house for dinner after sale, but before closing, except the HOA president. I had an estate sale and I kicked her out, loudly, by saying, well, look who is here, the lion, the witch, and the audacity of this bee, when she came to look at his stuff. She specifically requested a paperweight that he kept on his desk that had no meaning to anyone but her. When it didn't sell in the estate sale, I listed it on the neighborhood app for $1. Then said it would cost the amount of the late fee when she inquired, took the ad down, and I took it home when she declined to pay almost $500 for it, and it's on my desk now. So yeah, screw HOAs and the jerks that run them. Couldn't have any respect, dignity, or civility over a late fee while someone is dying. Said it before and I'll say it again, money and power corrupts people, and this is absolutely no dignity at a time when you need that dignity the most. Come on, HOA president, you really dropped the ball on this one. A Karen HOA story called Entitled Neighbor from Heck, posted by Gertrude Secret. This is the story of my entitled neighbor, Bob. We live in an HOA, I know, and Bob lives across the green space from us. Bob's entitlement was evident almost from the moment that we moved in. About a month after we moved in, the police, the sheriff, and the DEA came knocking at our door. Bob had called them and told them that we had lawn bags full of cannabis in our garage. It's important to note here that I use medical cannabis. Bob runs the local Narcotics Anonymous group. Well, I gave the cops the grand tour of our home, and there was nothing here at all. They apologized for the intrusion and left. A week later, our landlord called because Bob had called him, saying that we had a grow-op going on here. Our landlord knew he was lying because the landlord had just been here. Bob was trying to get us out of the neighborhood because he can't have that crap in his neighborhood. He gave up on that when my daughter and her husband purchased the property. Then he started with the constant complaints and demands. We weren't allowed to feed the squirrels because it made a mess. We couldn't plant clover because it might get in his yard. We had to mow more frequently because he mows twice a week. We only mowed once and it looked bad. The list goes on and on. He mows the green space between our houses every time he mows his lawn, killing all the wildflowers, and then he tells people that they can't walk there because he mows it so it's his. The worst of his entitled behavior started 2 years ago. He decided he was going to stop using his furnace and burn wood instead. Now, I have lung cancer and my next door neighbor has COPD, so this was really bad. In January 2022, we had a stagnant air warning, which means you can only use wood stoves or fireplaces if that's your only source of heat. Bob didn't care, and the thick smoke from his wood stove blanketed the neighborhood. One morning, I woke up unable to breathe. My daughter called for an ambulance, and I stopped breathing and had to be intubated. I spent 6 days in a medically induced coma and another week in the hospital. My kids tried talking to him, and I tried reasoning with him, but he didn't care. He said he was allowed to heat his house any way he saw fit. We called the county, and they told him his wood stove was outdated and needed to be replaced. He said he would replace it, but 2 years later, it still has not happened. The final straw for me was when another neighbor and I had an argument. It was all of 2 minutes and resolved the next day. He came over screaming at me because he was not putting up with this crap in his neighborhood. Then he screamed at me that it was not fair that I got disability for cancer and he had to work all day. A month later, he was suddenly in too much pain to work. He went on disability from his job, spending his time climbing on his roof, working on his motorcycles, mowing his yard every other day, and generally just enjoying not having to work. Someone he worked with turned him in for fraud, and we had investigators out here taking pictures of his activities around the house. I made sure to have a chat with them myself. After you hear what this Karen did, you'll wonder how she even made it as long as she did. It's called Entitled Coworker Got Herself Fired, posted by Dragon Crystal. Backstory: I never personally worked with this Karen, but I'd seen her chatting with everyone in our department on the workplace chat group made by the department manager. It reached the point where she just refused to work unless it was under her terms and made up excuses on why she couldn't work her assigned shifts. I'm just going to list off a few things that I recall seeing on work chat, a bit of my short experience with her, and then I'll mention what I was told by coworkers and what leads up to when she was eventually let go due to refusing to work her shifts and whatnot. So there's going to be me, Karen, and a few coworkers: Bella, Derry, Zelda, a manager, and Jane, another manager. Karen said, "Hey, anyone want Thursday off? I can take your shift and you can get the day off instead." Coworker said, "Sure, you can take my 11 to 5 shift." Actually, I meant night shift," Karen replied. "Oh, okay, that's fine, but I'm still leaving it open for grabs because I've got things to do and I can't make it." "Karen, you can take my 5 to 11 p.m. shift because I have to open the following day," another coworker said. Karen replied, "I can't work later than 10 p.m. I need my sleep and I live very far from here." Now, as a note, I didn't respond because I was at work and I was only able to take a quick glimpse at my phone. Also, I only work mornings, so I usually don't respond to picking up night shifts, and I only respond to shifts that I know I can pick up or if I'm messaged personally by a fellow coworker. Several days later, Karen says, "Hey, can anyone pick up my night shift? I'm not feeling well and I've been feeling off all of these days." Nobody responded because we were all busy or dealing with other things at the moment. Was told a few days later she never showed up to her shift that day or called out. Days later, Karen says again, "Does anyone want my morning shift for their night shift? I'm not a morning person and I really need my sleep. Hey, hello? Does anyone want my morning shift? It's from 11 to 5. 5 minutes goes by with no response, and I've seen her message, but it was in the middle of rush hour and I had a rush of drinks to make. Also, that shift was technically a mid-shift, not even morning shift anymore. I know, because I'm scheduled that shift several times." Karen says, "Wow, so that's how it's gonna be. If nobody wanted my shift, then just say it. Don't ignore me like that. That's rude." She unsends the message before saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't type that. It was my sister who wrote that last part." Sure, Karen. Now comes my short experience with her. On the first day, she was supposed to be my night replacement along with Bella, the other coworker. It was a bit busy, so I stayed a few minutes behind to help Bella catch up on drink orders before noticing that Karen has yet to show up. So I went to Zelda, the manager, and I told her, "Hey, Karen hasn't shown up yet and it's past my out time. Did you want me to stay and wait or I can head out?" Manager says, "Give me 2 minutes and I'll give Karen a call." Now, I'm not worried about it, so I agreed and I went back to helping Bella again. It's about 15 minutes after my shift and Bella is all caught up with the drinks and told me that I can head out until Karen arrives, so I approach Zelda, the manager, to see Karen's status. Manager says, "So I called Karen and she's currently stuck in traffic. If Bella is all caught up with drinks, you can head out." So I confirm that I just helped Bella get caught up with everything and the manager gives me the okay to leave for the day. Day 2, Karen again pulls the same thing, claiming she was again going to be late due to being stuck in traffic. Luckily, that day was a very, very slow day, and I was allowed to leave on time as soon as Bella arrived to replace me. Now is when she was fired. Terry, another coworker of mine, told me after I found out that Karen was fired that she'd never actually want to run any drinks except 1 or 2 the entire shift and would always be on her phone or wandering off somewhere to hide until managers intervened to get her back to work. Then she'd refuse to assist with bringing dirty dishes down to be washed and make everyone else do it instead, as well as fake to not being feeling well right after clocking in for work and then getting sent home, as well as picking up shifts and then just not showing up to them or claiming I overslept and didn't hear my alarm, or I misread my schedule and thought I was working tomorrow, while again pulling another no-call no-show. Management had enough and fired her along with several other people too. One whom I'll mention was caught sleeping on the job and smugly said to a fellow coworker, "You owe me for making me have to bring these dishes downstairs to be washed," when she and several other people were having upset stomachs due to something they ate for lunch that evening. She didn't owe him anything. He was sleeping on the job and she was doing all the work. She was perfectly fine after a few hours and still works there. I don't know how this Karen lasted as long as she did. You'd think she'd be axed way before this point. I sued the HOA president for selling my house from behind my back when I was away, and I'm not even part of the HOA. Find out what happens to the HOA president. Click the video on your screen for this ridiculous story and fallout, and I will see you there.